Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and it's Billboard Breakdown. So now we've reached the end of the Billboard year for 2017, the third year I have been running this show on YouTube. And while I will have plenty of thoughts about what hits eventually make the year-end list, stay tuned for about a month for those lists, I will have a lot to say. 2017 from a weekly chart perspective on the show has not exactly been one of the more interesting years. Yes, there was a pretty exciting point midway through the year where we flipped through a few number ones in a row, and the top 10 has certainly felt pretty unstable over the past couple of weeks, but for the most part, this year has absolutely been dominated by a few absolutely monstrous hits and a whole lot of songs that either blew their hype or never seemed to be all that huge to begin with. And even then, when you had Despacito chasing for the record, it tied it, never broke it, and it left many a track scrabbling to eke out a spot on that year-end list. And what does finally make it through in a month or so will be kind of fascinating. But until we get there, let's take one last look at our top 10. We're holding out for yet another week. We've got Rockstar by Post Malone featuring 21 Savage. And while I think it's a close call that it held its position, I'm not quite sure it's as close as some people think, including myself from last week. Yeah, it lags on YouTube. It got passed on this near its competition in sales and radio, but it still holds enough of a margin in streaming that survived the most obvious disruption, which could be more telling of some lasting strength minus any competition. Now compare this to Havana by Camila Cabello featuring Young Thug at number 2. Yes, it's beating Rockstar in everything but streaming, but it actually lost significantly in on-demand, a margin that it needed to make up to go to number 1, and honestly that's not a good sign. Granted, it's not like Bodak Yellow by Cardi B is gonna seriously make a play at number 3. It's got good YouTube, sure, but it's bleeding in all other categories, especially on the radio. It's not moving past its current position. Then, thanks to the album dropping, we got Sam Smith's Too Good at Goodbyes up to number 4, but I don't really have any faith that this will hold its spot. Radio is already softening, the sales are not stellar, and while streaming got a huge boost, I'm not quite sure I can predict it lasting once the album blows over. Sam Smith doesn't strike me as a traditional streaming-driven artist. Then we have Thunder by Imagine Dragons holding at number 5. No real surprise as it's still gaining airplay and sales are still good, but with the streaming I don't really see this getting a lot higher. Similar case for 1-800-273-8255 by Logic featuring Alessia Cara and Khalid drooping down to number 6. It's just fading across the board, though the losses are more pronounced on the radio. And speaking of fading radio, Feel It Still by Portugal and Man is down to number 7. Yeah, sales are down too, but it's more because while it is still on top in airplay by a fair margin, that will likely be eclipsed in a week or two if it continues losing the way it is. Then we got a song returning to the top 10, Perfect by Ed Sheeran at number 8, and folks, we might as well get used to this song in the top 10 for a while, because even if the radio is a little slow to pick it up and the streaming is not great, those sales numbers are pretty potent, and the video just dropped, and that's going to drive streaming up again. But now we've got a song that's been on the edges of the top 10 and only now has broken in, What Lovers Do by Maroon 5 featuring SZA. I like to say this got here thanks to the album that I've never even pretended to start caring about, probably also explains the sales bump, but it's also quietly become pretty damn big on the radio, and while the momentum seems to be wavering a little bit, it will likely have some staying power going forward, and I don't mind that. It's an okay song, I guess. And finally, clinging on to number 10, even despite decent weeks on radio and YouTube, we have Mi Gente by J Balvin, Willie William featuring Beyonce at number 10. And look, the way things in sales and streaming are going, I would not put a lot of money on this sticking around. I'm actually kind of okay with that. And with that hopeful promise, our losers and dropouts. Couple considerable ones in the latter category, most notably Location by Khalid, which became a huge sleeper hit this year. Never even breaking the top 10, but it was a big enough hit, it's definitely making that year-end list. Along with it, we also lost All the Pretty Girls by Kenny Chesney, no surprise after last week, BED by Jacques, and Heartache on the Dance Floor by John Party. And considering how inconsistent really all of these have been, I'm not too fussed or surprised. Where things get a little bit interesting are in our losers this week. And yes, some of them are obvious, like Patek Water by Future, Young Thug and Offset to 97, or Glorious by Macklemore featuring Skylar Grey to 98. They were heading out anyway. I'm a little bit more surprised and kind of encouraged by the loss for Go Flex by Post Malone to 96, or Sauce It Up by Lil Uzi Vert to 89, and Transportin' by Kodak Black to 86. Because if there's a rapper who's bound to fade out pretty fast after 2017 is over, I would put money on it being being Kodak Black, and thank God for that. Then we got losses after a considerable boost from last week as the hype fades. Love So Soft by Kelly Clarkson dips hard down to 57, Wolves by Selena Gomez and Marshmello droops down to 55, and Ready For It by Taylor Swift fell down to 30. But really, the run-up for Reputation has not been good on the Hot 100, as Gorgeous also fell down to 85. Keep in mind that Taylor Swift in her bizarre and rather stupid war against streaming platforms has delayed her release there for a full week after the album release. And thus, given how much streaming matters in the Hot 100 right now, she just hurt her chances for a massive album bump because she won't have that simultaneous surge of momentum. She'll get her sales one week and streaming will pick up the week after. Now granted, with those sales numbers, I could be wrong here, but I don't think I am. Oh, and Wild Thoughts by DJ Khaled featuring Rihanna and Bryson Tiller is down to 48. Okay, admit it. Since the summer, you haven't really thought that much about the song either. It's not bad, but it's not gonna stick with you. Now, our gains in returning entries are not nearly as surprising, especially in the latter category as Pray by Sam Smith came back to 82 after the album drop, and Broken Halos by Chris Stapleton thankfully went back to 92 after a very limited tracking week and cleaning up again at the CMAs. Hopefully, this will go higher, but really, I'm just happy it's back. But speaking of a limited tracking week, there's also the biggest driver behind over half of our gains. Yes, No Limit by G-Eazy featuring A$AP Rocky and Cardi B is quietly picking up a lot of streaming, YouTube and radio to become a significant hit at number 13. This will probably break the top 10. And The Way Life Goes by Lil Uzi Vert, No Wonder went to 31 off the remix. But the bigger boost came for our new rivals from last week on Without Warning by Offset, 21 Savage, and Metro Boomin. And now with the full tracking week, Ghostface Killers of Travis Scott went to 35, Ric Flair Drip went up to 50, Rap Saved My Life picked up to 64, and My Choppa Hate went up to 73. And on that topic, it's also touched on many of our new arrivals, starting off with number 100, Nightmare by Offset and Metro Boomin.
Freddy Krueger, give him a nightmare. Soon as you close your eyes, nigga, we right there. You did. Freddy Krueger, give him a nightmare. Soon as you close your eyes, nigga, we right there. Come in the middle of the night like it's a nightmare. You open your eye, not dreaming, nigga, we right there.
Okay, so Ric Flair Drip wound up being my top song of last week because it showed a great balance between Offset and Metro Boomin with no real distractions. So how did they do on their second solo showcase? Well, not as good as the last song, but it's still pretty decent. The subtle rumble against the bass against the glassy eeriness of the synth works decently well. And while I don't think Offset's flows are quite as impressive, he can capture some of the menace of the track in his delivery and even some of his more violent references. The problem again though is a lack of focus. If you're immediately going to switch over to brand name flexing, you will compromise some of that violent, dark atmosphere. So yeah, it's not bad, sure, but I'm not remotely surprised it needed another week to cross over, and I don't expect it to stick around. Number 99, Mad Stalkers by Offset, 21 Savage, and Metro Boomin.
All my niggas mad cautious. I got mad dick, turn these hoes into mad stalkers. 21. I got mad dick, turn these hoes into mad stalkers. 21.
You know, I'm not sure it helps your ominous vibe to have a sample of women giggling in your mix, but again, if there is one thing I can commend about Without Warning, it would probably be some of this production, because this isn't bad. As the blurry warble of melody plays off the thicker trap beat, it does fit the vibe, and while I'm not crazy about 21 Savage on the hook, it does kind of set up the mood. And then Offset shows up, switches up his flow 4 times in one verse, and I appreciate that he sticks with slightly more gristly subject matter. It's a pretty damn solid performance. But then we have to deal with 21 Savage, and look, I don't think his verse is that bad. His flow's a little faster, you can tell he's trying a little bit harder to be expressive, but man, how is it when Offset actually pulls off more of a sense of menace that's consistent in his content, 21 Savage just whiffs it by focusing on the girl who is somehow too much bitch. Yeah, the violent references are there, but they're more peripheral, and when he returns to that monotone hook, it doesn't help him. You know what, this isn't bad, but this should be so much better than it really is. Number 94, Pull Up and Wreck by Big Sean and Metro Boomin featuring 21 Savage.
Pull up and wreck, pull up and wreck, yeah. Pull up and wreck, yeah. Pull up and wreck. I know some east side niggas and they love to bang. Know some west side niggas like to do the same thing. Like pull up and wreck, yeah. Pull up and wreck, yeah. Pull up and wreck. Take no disrespect.
Did anybody actually know that Big Sean was releasing a single this week, let alone that he got Metro Boomin and 21 Savage on it? Seriously, seriously, this seemed to come right the hell out of nowhere. I had no buzz for this song. And while I might have issues with his consistency, I probably would prefer Offset's rapping than Big Sean's, especially when it feels like Big Sean is doing more of his Drake impression here. Now, to his credit, he balanced out against the faded symphonic sample better than I thought he would, and I certainly think that his rhyming is a little bit more interesting than whatever the hell 21 Savage is doing. Who the hell puts codeine in your iced tea, you doofus? But some of these bars here, talking about growing up playing GoldenEye to justify sticking to your mission, as saying you don't drink tap water but got tap phones? Why would you even need to brag about that? You would think you would want to run under the radar here in these songs. I've never understood this sort of bragging. But honestly, the hook here is pretty decent, and while I've definitely heard Big Sean do better songs, this is passable, I guess, at least for me. Number 93, Wait by Maroon 5.
Just wait, could you come and be? 'Cause I wanna be with you.
So as I've mentioned before, I really don't care about the new Maroon 5 album, but really, who does at this point? There has been nothing essential or likable or really all that interesting about Maroon 5 in the 2010s, and considering they called their newest album Red Pill Blues, and the best thing I can say about any of their singles that they've been vaguely tolerable, I wasn't expecting to see another song chart, or all that excited about it either. And listening to Wait, well, turns out I was exactly on the money with this, because this is pretty utterly mediocre, if not outright bad. For one, whoever thought that slapdash guitar line needed to be buried behind a fizzy trap beat that somehow sounds muddy against the pitch-corrected tunings around Adam Levine's vocals, honestly probably did the song a favor, but as a consequence, it becomes just another utterly gutless trap tune with no real groove or personality for me. And considering the song is about drunkenly gate-crashing an ex's family event to beg her to take him back, having no assertive personality to speak of gives all the evidence in the world why Adam Levine got dumped here. For an easy comparison, look at the country classic from Garth Brooks, Friends in Low Places. Same setup, but not only does Garth Brooks have effortless hangdog charisma to sell this sort of song, he knows how to play up the contrast with his ex and catharsis for that anthemic chorus. This is so weak. It's utterly pathetic, and given the modern context, absolutely living up to the title of the album. Pass. 79, Rubbin' Off the Paint by YBN Nahmir.
That's why these bitches on me. I've been coolin' laying low, but I'm not taking the seat. But just know a nigga back in this time I won't leave. I've been running, gotta check me your bag. I got hundreds on my neck and I got shoes on my ass. Nigga said I'm going broke while I just take it and laugh. I be speeding in that foreign with 5-0 on my ass. But
so one of the running themes of the past few years, and especially in 2017, are a series of utterly forgettable trap-leaning songs that get big off of a meme, give the artist a short infusion of cash, and then they return to utter irrelevance and you never hear from them again. Now, the newest artist to get in that lane is YBN Nahmir, who got picked up off of World Star, and yet somehow already has co-signs by PNB Rock and Chris Brown. That's not suspicious at all. And now this is for a song referencing fellow soon-to-be-forgotten MC Tay-K, and the song here, basically one verse, no real hook or anything all that memorable. Now, granted, when you open up the song with a SpongeBob sample, you might get some immediate attention, but the sad fact is that the content and the delivery, it's not really all that interesting. A voice that sounds distressingly like Big Sean's, and yet somehow with cheaper vocal production and slightly more awkward flows, punctuated more by calls to free some of his friends from prison, which always rings a little bit weird to me when he references shooting people. And then you pair it with a by-the-numbers, flattened synth loop and a sharper trap beat. Look, this isn't good, but it's gonna be forgotten by pretty much everybody, so next. Number 65, Lemon by NERD and Rihanna.
Hey, niggas can't believe my race. Hey, niggas hit you with the Eli face. Bouncing around, bouncing. Scrunching they eyes with your name in their mouthing. Bouncing around.
You know, I'm genuinely curious how many people outside of those really in the know or more in the underground would really get excited about seeing an NERD song show up on the Hot 100 in 2017. And for the record, this is their first song in their entire 15 plus career years to ever hit the mainstream Hot 100. But now for some context. You might not recognize this group by the band name, even though you probably should, but I guarantee you'll know two of the members, Chad Hugo and Pharrell Williams, otherwise known as the Neptunes, one of the biggest production duos of the past past 2 decades. This was their funk rock band side project and won critical acclaim with their debut album in 2002, albeit a little bit after the fashion, and a surprising amount of commercial success, especially in the UK, but gradual diminishing returns to their next 3 albums throughout the decade, with plans to release a new album in January this year, 8 years after Nothing came out in November of 2010. And yeah, the album was actually called Nothing, I'm not just making a play on words there. And so, with the inclusion of Rihanna to guarantee chart success, and it's a big comeback, and the fact that NERD tended to be remembered pretty fondly by anybody who didn't really care about the lyrics, we now have Lemon, and I'm not really sure how to feel about it. Seriously, as much as there is some bounce to the thicker trap beat and the faint and drippy tinkle of melody around it and the vocal sample, there is some groove there. Repeated listens makes me wonder where the hell the rest of the song is. It almost feels a little bit unfinished in some of the production. And that's before you get the switch to an entirely different groove and hook where Rihanna shows up rapping. And look, I said it back when she was on Loyalty with Kendrick Lamar. She's got the expressive sort of delivery that will work for hip-hop. She is credible, and she does just fine with this sort of braggadocious content. Easily more impressive than Pharrell, who just kinda can't pull off this sort of swagger against this production. At least to me, his vocal tone just does not work for it. Now, normally, this would be where I would rip on some of the writing. Notoriously the worst thing about any NERD project. But the truth is, the lyrics are actually genuinely fine, avoiding some of the juvenile sexual content for some decent, if unexceptional wordplay here. So yeah, this is actually pretty tolerable. Wish the production felt a little bit more like a full song, but as it is, I think I can kinda dig this. This is pretty good. And finally, number 27, Call It What You Want by Taylor Swift.
I'm the one he's walking to. So call it what you want, yeah, call it what you want to. My baby's fly like a jet stream, high above the whole scene, loves me like I'm brand new. So call it what you want, yeah, call it what you want to.
It's the last of Taylor Swift's promo singles, and honestly, it's probably the one I like the most. The opening string sample reminded me a little bit more of the opulent tones that crept through in the mid to late 2000s in pop. Shame it just gets buried beneath a drippy trap knock with overblown synth warbles, hollow snaps, and a hi-hat tap that's way too dominant in the mix. But putting aside a potentially pretty melody that then gets overshadowed, the content does feel a little bit more anchored in something that could be real. More of a straightforward love song that's trying to ignore everything that everyone has done to Taylor Swift. Ugh. And telling the guy that he doesn't need to save her. And look, I appreciate her acknowledging that she makes the same mistakes every single time with guys. But as I said when I reviewed Reputation, what's gonna make this situation any different in the long run? Beyond a cutesy camaraderie where she trusts him like a brother. Interesting. But beyond that, it's hard not to feel like Taylor Swift gets swallowed up in her own drab production here, even despite a decent enough cadence on the hook, as deliberately underperforming just does not net her a very strong result. It honestly kind of feels like album filler. It's not a bad song, but again, not exactly memorable either. And that ends out our weekend. Wow, that's a pretty limp way to end this Billboard year for 2017. Best, and really not by much, it's gonna go to Lemon by NERD and Rihanna for being a decently interesting tune. I can see this growing on me, even though I'm looking forward to when the song is performed with some live instrumentation and actually feels a little bit more finished. Worst, yeah, there is plenty of okay to mediocre trap, but Wait by Maroon 5 is easily the most limp and pathetic for me. Let's get that out of here. And like always, I would love your feedback if you want to see me continue Billboard Breakdown or anything I might be able to do to switch things up for 2018, where it looks like we're going to get a bunch of Eminem and Beyonce fighting it out with Taylor Swift for that single, and I have no idea who I even want to win, but we'll save that maybe for next week. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.